Welcome to the Tripod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn. Last week we went 2-1 on our best bets. We hit a small multi, we lost the big multi on the last leg, and we lost the mixed matchup. So right there you have a bit of a mixed bag of results. Overall, positive, overall room to improve. I discussed my thoughts on the individual matches in the live recap show, which I will do every single round, and you can still watch or go back and listen to that one, but that show is live within 10 minutes of full time of the final game, and I'm here to face up to the results, good or bad, interact with you guys, share my thoughts on the matches for those who maybe didn't catch every game, and sometimes tell you a bit more of the story beyond the scoreboard, as well as share insights that I might have seen that I believe can give an edge moving forward. So I invite you guys to tune in live if you can, or go back and catch it for specific thoughts on last week. Round 2 preview is all about this week. Now, when we look back around one, just in general, I guess you could say none of the results were shocking. Maybe Warriors winning 13 plus or by 13 was the closest, but they were slight underdogs, as were the Storm, and every other favourite won the game. So congrats to people who did really well on their tips, because I know plenty of people got 8 out of 8 or 7 out of 8 last week, and some people may even be thinking you don't need your help, you know what you're doing, and I say fair enough, good luck to everyone, but knowing the NRL as I do, I just feel there could be a curveball coming along very soon. It's never that easy to predict, and it's certainly never easy to make money. Now, just before we jump into the best bets, a reminder, this pod premieres on YouTube first, 15 minutes earlier than anywhere else. And although I was watching last week to see how the markets would shift when the pod went live, none of the lines actually moved straight away. You could still got it, all the lines, by the time the pod was on Facebook, and even for a couple of days after that, the Knights line didn't move. The Storm, you could get the plus half in the first half. But occasionally, people who follow know that these lines and odds do move sometimes. So if you want to be among the very first people watching it along with the first people who can see the pod, check it out on YouTube. Subscribe now. Round 2 best bets. My first best bet, I'm taking the Eels plus 6.5. It's at $2 on Ladbrokes and Neds, and I'm sure you guys could have predicted that, and that's not a bad thing. I get people saying, I knew you were going to tip that, and that's the idea. You follow the pod, you kind of learn our way of thinking, and you can actually find some winners before we even have to tell you. Next best odds are for the 6.5, $1.90 on TopSport and Sportsbet. Put simply, I think their forward pack is as good as Melbourne's. I know that's a big statement, but Melbourne's still without Finucane and still without Brandon Smith playing a loose forward role. I'm still a believer in the Eels' spine. No doubt they weren't as impressive as Melbourne were last week, although Brown and Marnie had sensational games, as did Pappy and Munster. And look, I don't give them a big playmaking edge even in the outside backs. You know, you look at the resurgence of a guy like Fergo in a contract year. This game is at Wankbest Stadium. I'm out on record saying I don't think the Eels are as far away from the other big 5 that everyone else thinks, so I got to take them here. I don't necessarily know if they're going to win the game, but catching a full plus 6.5 at home, I'm on Parramatta in the Thursday night football. Then we move to Friday night, and I'm taking the Gold Coast Titans in the M1 Derby, minus 7.5. Also on Ladbrokes and Neds, $2 odds. Your next best $1.95 on TopSport. And my principle here is I'm going to take the good team off a bad loss. I believe in the Titans as a top 8 caliber side this year. I think that was quite a humbling defeat last week, as I mentioned, going down by 13 points and barely firing a shot against New Zealand. And I don't want to be too dramatic, but this is such a huge game for Gold Coast. Not just to fall 0-2, and then you're always kind of on an uphill battle to get back in towards pushing towards the finals, but it would be 0-2, and it would be losing to the 16th team from last year that is undermanned, with still no Payne Haas, still no Katoni Staggs, and you got Fafita from them. So put simply, I think the Titans should be too strong. They'll bounce back. They're at home, and they should overpower the Broncos, and I'm willing to lay what might seem like a high line to some, that I'm laying the minus 7.5 with the Titans' best bet. And finally, my third best bet for round 2 so far, and these are all the ones I'm sharing on the pod tonight, is the Tigers plus 12.5 mechanical. Now, this is my first mechanical best bet of the season. It's a really clever one if you ask me. So if you haven't seen a mechanical bet before, you might learn something here. We're going to make 2 bets that's going to widen our range of outcomes that would see us win. You're going to put 91% of a best bet stake on the Tigers plus 11.5, $2 odds, Ladbrokes and Neds. You're going to put that remaining 9% on the Roosters to win by exactly 12. That's paying 21 to 1 on Unibet, and that is under match, starts 12-0 and then you select draw. So if the match starts 12-0 to the Roosters and ends as a draw in that market, then you get paid out 21-1. And that equates to getting the Tigers at $1.82 plus 12.5. Now, I'm giving them another shot. I know they let us down last week, but there were some positive signs. 6-all first half, and they had less ball. We get Dwayhe back in the halves. I thought the Raiders were just really ruthless and made life difficult for them, so made the Tigers look maybe a little bit worse than they are. Also, the Roosters looked fantastic last week, but let's acknowledge that Manly was awful and that the Roosters have lost Jake Friend, they've lost Crichton to suspension, Radley is still not back. This match is at Campbelltown. We've got the Tigers off, again, a humbling defeat. I like taking teams off a bad loss because I know their focus coming into next week, and the Tigers lost by 18 and Madge was not happy. I just feel this line doesn't respect the Tigers quite enough. You guys know I'm high on them coming into this season. I'm not jumping off yet. And we're sacrificing 18 cents on the price, but we pick up a key number in 12, which quite often a game, especially with a line in that vicinity, will land exactly on 12. And as you're going to hear later in this pod, this line is as low as 9.5. So we're also beating the market with that best bet. Okay, so those are the best bets. Now, there is still one more best bet that I will share a little later in this pod. That's the mixed matchup. We lost last week, but I'm back at it again this week, as I will every week. And this one's going to be paying $3.50, and it will involve matches on Thursday and Friday games. But the odds aren't going to move violently, or they're not going to move on this one. This is a committed price, so you can hang out for the explanation if you want. Just one more thing I'll say in general about the best bets before we tackle the games. You don't have to play an all or nothing approach following me, following the pod. I mean, in 6 years plus, certainly I've never given out a best bet that I didn't think would win more likely than it would lose. I always feel that the most likely outcome on a best bet is it's going to win, and that's always the goal, is to find as many of those as I can. But the fact is, over the years, fellow tipsters get sharper, the marketplace gets sharper, the sharp punters, the bookies themselves get sharper. You need to adapt, you need to improve, and I do try and do that. We have always tried to do that each year, but certainly I've gotten a lot of feedback over the years from people who follow along, who point out what they see as weaknesses, pardon me, in the tips. So they'll say, oh, I feel like your totals players are never too confident. They're always lotteries, or you guys don't do well in Warriors games. You don't do well in Broncos games. Just like last week, some people said, look, I respect your tips, but I'm not trusting the Tigers down in Canberra. And, I say, fair enough, leave it out, go the other way. Whatever win percentage I ultimately achieve for season 2021, you don't have to agree with everything. Basically, you can listen, you can apply your filter over the top, and you might go even better percentage than the tripod does by weeding out the plays you don't think are as strong, or even going against it. And I'll even go a step further. There's always conspiracy theorists, especially if I lose a tip or two on one of our sponsors. Top Sport's the main sponsor this year, not an exclusive sponsor. I give tips out with every bookie where I see value. But some people are going to say, if a Top Sport tip loses, that I've deliberately given out a lemon, which, hand on heart, I can say I've never done that. I never would do that. But the beauty of betting is, if you really believe something like that, you can always back the opposite side. So whenever I try and give out a best bet, I will absolutely give my strongest reasoning. That's just to justify why I believe it's a good bet. It's not me trying to talk you into it. I don't mind at all if people back them or just use it for your consideration. So the truth is, avoiding a losing bet is even better than backing a winning bet long term for your win percentage, your ROI, and your profit. So with that all being said, we're going to jump into the games. But first, here's 2 minutes from Tristan with Market Watch from Top Sport, with important information of how the bookies have adjusted to round one.
Hello punters, it's Tristan here from Top Sport. We're back into round two footy action. Round one, the punters gave us a bit of a flogging, so we're trying to bounce back. There's already been some big moves in round two, early doors. The biggest betting game early days have been Parramatta and the Storm. The Eels were gone 6.5 into 6, where the punters took the early plus, and then as soon as we got to a flat 6, the punters had come for the Storm, where there's been good weight of money to push that line back to 6.5. The other game that's seen a bit of support has been the Tigers against the Roosters. The Tigers fans came quite heavily for them last start and left the money in the bag, obviously, so they bounced back here to take the 10.5 and already moved the line into 9.5 against the Roosters. A few obviously positive and a few disappointing performances throughout the week, so our power rankings have changed slightly. We've seen the obvious team, obviously Manly's dropped back a little bit. If you probably priced that game up before last week's performance, it might be 8.5. It's now 10.5 against the Bunnies. The other one that is obviously the team that were disappointing were the Titans. However, they're playing the Broncos, who showed a bit of passion, a bit of pride in their jersey, but they've got a pretty big injury ward. So the line is probably what it was if you set it prior to last week's games. It's 7.5 there. A little bit of money for the Broncos, but obviously it's going to be dependent on the team list that are sent out. The team that were probably surprised and performed above expectations were the Sharkies. You price that game up before the weekend, it's probably 8. It's around that converted try mark now at 6.5. The two teams that were positive last weekend as well were the Warriors and the Knights. We probably expect whoever wins this game on the weekend will probably get to a clear 6 on the power rankings unless the Eels can cause an upset. All right, punters, good luck over the weekend. Hope you're back a winner. Thanks.
Sorry to any women or children who might have got a fright. I should have warned you, but if you didn't see the live recap, you may not have known that. Huge respect to Tristan. He has shaved for a cure. So that display explains the bald dome there. And on top of that, Top Sport matched all the donations towards the leukemia shave for a cure as well. So great stuff all around. My hair is going that way, but I think if I can pick more winners than losers this season, maybe I can slow down that rate that it does fall out. You've heard the best bets, but let's still take a closer look at the action. It begins on Thursday night with the Eels hosting the Storm, and as I said, the line is 6.5, the Storm favourites. The total's 37.5, and the best bet is the Eels plus 6.5 on Ladbrokes and Ned. So the Storm were outstanding last weekend. They cashed the first best bet of the season. They're unchanged coming into this one, which means still no Harry Grant, no Dale Finucane. Now, I questioned their middle. If they did have a weakness against the Bunnies, it held up. And on top of that, they were so potent on the edges. And look, they did let the Bunnies get back into the game. But personally, I just feel that building a lead like they did and getting out to 22-0 impresses me more than a team coming back. I think teams do just come back naturally, just the way games swing. So you know what you'll get out of Melbourne, and this isn't really a bet against Melbourne. Although with a couple of really quality players out, they're not 100% strength. But look at Parramatta. Well, they did the opposite last week. They were awful in the first half, and they were really good in the second half. And I've just said I'm not as impressed. You can say Parramatta won 24-0 second half, but it's kind of actually easier to do that when you spot the other team a lead and just the way that the game is played. They do get a little stronger near Corey returns. And, I want to shout out Papali'i because nobody said that the Eels had a good recruitment over the summer. Everyone's just talked about the loss of Jennings, but Papali'i could be a little diamond in the rough of a find there, bolstering the depth and the forward pack. And on that forward pack, I said it at the top, I think it's as good as Melbourne without Finucane. I love what Parramatta's spine is. I think they always play well at wank best. And I think they're going to push the Storm here. I've explained why. I'm taking the 6.5. I even think they do have a chance to win this one. We move on to Friday. Warriors playing the Knights in Gosford. It's basically pick'em, and the total's 38.5. In fact, because it's in Gosford, it's basically a derby game. Now, the Warriors, who were super impressive last week, lose Ewan Aitken, which is a shame. He's one of their big recruits, especially in the back line. Adam Pompey comes in. For the Knights, I think they've named the same 1-17, but we saw Kurt Mann and Bradman Best, who are two really important backs, especially when you consider that, they're still missing Callum Ponga, still without Edric Lee. So those guys are hurt, but they've been cleared and they've been named. But you still would want to monitor that as we move to Friday, whether they definitely are able to take the field. It's worth mentioning straight away that there is rain forecast for this. And I mentioned it on the recap last week. The two wettest games of the round were actually the two highest scoring games, I think. So it doesn't guarantee low scoring. But nonetheless, if a game's forecast to be played in really wet conditions, I'm going to weight the matchup higher to the team I think has the stronger forward pack, halves that can control the game, and a team that can play with discipline and control the ball. And I just won't bet against Newcastle because I rate their forward pack that highly. You look at, it's really hard to pick up like a player that can really take your pack to another level. And arguably both these teams have done that. Tyson Frizzell I thought was outstanding last weekend. Equally, Adam Fanua-Blake for the Warriors, and Sirinen was a great recruit too. So you look at these forward packs, I was thinking maybe I give Slayage to the Knights, but then you also got to remember that the strength of the carries from the back three of the Warriors in RTS, Marmelo, Fusatua, that's like having an extra couple of star forwards with the way they get their sets started. Motivation-wise, I think it's worth mentioning this is the Nathan Brown revenge game. Does it mean the Knights want to make a point to Nathan Brown because they didn't like him at the end there? Or does Brownie want to get revenge against the Knights? We'll see about that. And another one is the Warriors flogged the Knights by 30 points in round 16 last year in Tamworth. when the Knights came into that game favourites, and it was the Knights who were, in finals position and the Warriors on the outside looking in, and they absolutely towed them up. So I think motivation, revenge, edge to the Knights. I think it's going to be a popular pick to take New Zealand because they looked so impressive last week. I think lots of people will be on New Zealand. I won't be this weekend because I thought the Titans were toothless against them. I do think this game could go either way. So I guess stay tuned tomorrow, Friday. I'm going to monitor the fitness of the key players for the Knights. And as I explained last week, I finalised my best bets. So if the market moves, if more information comes through, if more markets open up, I may add 1 or 2 extra best bets to the ones that have been shared on Wednesday. You find them in the Tripod app, which is free, and also in the Tripod Facebook group, which is free. But I will give you my mixed matchup right now because it involves the first 2 games of the round, and it is the Eels to outscore the Warriors in round 2, paying $3.50. You can have up to $100 on that on TopSport. If you want to join TopSport, you can join with the code TRYPOD, TRYPOD. Now, I've already made the case for the Eels. I also think Melbourne in the new era, they don't always grind you to death. They sometimes outgun you. And last time the Parramatta and Melbourne met was in the finals, and it was 36-24. So this could be a high-scoring game to kick off round 2. Hopefully a few points for the Eels, which would be good for our best bet and for this one. And if the Storm are swinging the ball out wide to Munster and Pappenhausen, we don't have our heart in our mouth because an open game is actually better for us. We want a few points. And then why do I go against the Warriors? Well, I've already talked about my respect I've got for the Knights. I think that they've got a defensive identity. I also really noticed the way that the Warriors played in round 1. I thought they were really defensively sound. And in wet conditions, and in a game like where there is no Kalen Ponga yet, and it could be tight, I could see that one being low scoring. So I don't really need to predict who wins in Knights Warriors to feel that I don't necessarily think that the Warriors will put up a lot of points in this game. And one final, different way to look at it, Parramatta are $3 to beat the Storm. So you're getting $3 odds that Parramatta's going to score more than the Storm. Well, this is $3.50, and they don't have to beat the Storm for this to win. They don't have to score more points than the Storm. They have to score more points than the Warriors the next day. So jump on that mixed matchup if that appeals to you, even though we lost last week. I'm going to try and find value every week, and over a season long, I think I can provide value more often than not. Obviously at $3.50, it's no lock, but I like the price there. We move to the later game Friday night, and we will see a Queensland team win a game in 2021, and that will be the winner of this game, I guess, unless it ends in a 90-minute tie. And I've already explained, I'm taking the Titans minus 7.5. The changes, Sammy is in for an injured Kelly. Good news for Brisbane on the injury front, because Xavier Coates' neck injury looked really bad, but he's been named. Asiata's injury looked nasty, but he's also back. They do lose Matt Lodge to a hammy, and that's on top of other big names that are already out, though. Look, the Broncos were bloody spirited last week, but I did say you had to expect that at Suncorp season opener of such a bad year, and the Titans were way off the mark. And in hindsight, you can also understand why, when so much hype in the off-season, kind of a reality check for them. Look, I'll share a bit of a philosophy change I've made over the last few years, because if you followed the pod for many years, you'll know for sure. We always used to find more value in underdogs, and we would more often take the points than we would lay the points. But I do believe as the marketplace has sharpened up, there's just less opportunities where teams are just blatantly catching too many points. And what that sometimes means is on the other side, sometimes you get favourites at actually a fair or even cheap line, kind of like I thought we were getting with the Knights last week. Plus, with the new rules, I think more than ever, favourites can blow their opponent out late when the weight of possession and fatigue just becomes too much. And I could see it going that way. We've seen how Brisbane does struggle second half, and they did that mightily last year, and it didn't show any improvement in round 1. So you've got the Titans at home. I do believe they've got the better pack, got the better halves. They've got the X factor in AJ Brimson, a player who I think can break the game open more than what Brisbane has. They've got the better bench too, and just that more cohesion of the same coach, same coaching staff as last season, while teams with new overhauls, they take a little bit longer to get better, which is what Kevy and his team, are hoping for this season. And if you bet the Titans now, there's always a chance tomorrow or Friday you hear, actually Xavier Coates won't be good to go, Asiata won't be good to go, and the line could easily move another half point in our favour. Saturday games, I'll keep this one short, but it's the Bulldogs hosting Panthers. This line has moved all the way to 16.5, obviously Penrith favoured, and the total 40.5. Only key change, I guess, Marshall King back from the All-Star game injury, in at number 9 for the Bulldogs. Look, For me to have any interest in grabbing the points with the underdog, I need to give the underdog a realistic chance of an upset. I don't see that here. You guys heard me talk about the Bulldogs last week. I think this process of their improvement will take a bit more time, whereas Penrith were utterly dominant against North Queensland, gave them nothing. Would I lay the number of points? No, not in round 2. Maybe later in a year if I thought there was a chance the opponent was just depleted and potentially would give up. But teams don't really give up in round 2. So I'm not saying Panthers can't cover this line, but I don't have the huge amount of confidence either way. I move on to the twilight game. Manly against the Rabbitohs. The Rabbitohs are a 10.5 point favourite and the total's 41.5. And I guess you'd say Gold Coast was super disappointing in round 1, and you'd probably say the worst performance of all was Manly. And despite that, they've gone with no major changes. I think Manly's just shuffled the bench, really. Whereas for Souths, they weren't disgraced against the Storm. Storm were just red hot. Surprisingly, they haven't picked Josh Mansour, and Kolomatangi moves into the starting second row. Now, look, it wouldn't be hard to look at this Manly Rabbitohs game and envision just a tear up by the Rabbitohs, which I think they did to Manly late last season as well, if you recall that game. It was something like 36-0 at halftime. But like for Manly to lose by 40 points last week, be at home this week and be over a 10-point underdog, it's not like they've got a host of injuries. We know they've only got one main injury. It just happens to be the most important player in the team. But you have to be really bad to lose by 40 round 1 and be like a double-digit home underdog in round 2. I don't know if we can completely write them off like that. It's hard sometimes when you get steamrolled too. It's just hard to get back in the game. So maybe just the class of the Roosters made them look worse than they are. Look, I don't have the confidence in the Manly squad, so I'm not jumping on them. I'm not saying they're a great bet. But again, if you jump on South Sydney, like I still don't know how many weeks away they are from being a finished product. We know that Wayne Bennett likes his teams to build into a season. So do South Sydney bounce back from a loss last week and win here? Probably. But can I be certain that they roll Manly? No, not sure. In fact, I'd like to see Manly make a game of this, but I guess we'll find out on Saturday. The nightcap on Saturday night is an interesting one. It's the Cowboys at home to the Dragons. The Dragons are catching plus 5.5, the total 43.5. And you've got two teams that none of us really expect to be any good this year. They've both got new coaches. They were both disappointed in their results last week, but they also showed signs of life. For the Cowboys, really stout, really good resilience defensively when you consider the weight of possession that was against them. They only conceded one try in the first 55 minutes against Penrith. So that's a positive that you can take out of it, despite they put up a goose egg. And for the Dragons, well, they were down 14-0 and they fought back in the game. And if it wasn't for a pretty harsh call, they would have actually got back in front. And now they add Corey Norman too, who had that suspension. That's going to give them some life. Cody Ramsey has this injury doubt, but he has been named. To me, the line feels about right. I do think the Cowboys are the slightly better team. They're at home, but I could see the Dragons fighting them for this one. So I'm not getting enough points to feel like I'm getting super value on St. George. I have to pass this one as well. And then the Tigers play the Roosters on Sunday at Campbelltown, and the line is 9.5. I'm showing you the line, total, and head-to-head odds just for your reference from Bet365 at the time of recording this, and it's 9.5, although it's juiced to the minus 9.5. And you heard on Market Watch, Tristan also said this line is 9.5. But in other bookies, and all the other major bookies, it's 10.5 or 11.5, as you heard in the best bet. Grabbing that 11.5 $2 odds and combining it with the Roosters by exactly 12 at $21 on Unibet to create a mechanical plus 12.5. And while that pays $1.82, if it actually happens to land exactly 12, it'll pay out to us at $1.89. So I love the market value that I'm getting there when we're getting 12.5 on a game that's 9.5 in places. Even though the Tigers spoiled our weekend last weekend, I've explained my reasons that I'll give them a pass or give them another shot just because you add Dwayne here, and I thought their halves play was really awful. I don't think Moses Mbai offered anything. This week he's in the number 14 jersey, and I guess you could, if you wanted to be kind, you'd say he's a great utility. If you wanted to be a bit more cruel, you'd say he isn't good enough at any one position to actually hold down a spot, and to think of the money he's on, and to think that he got handed the captaincy of this team, to think he's been given Origin jerseys. I expect more from him, and I hope that maybe he really grows into some of these guys are just awesome number 14s, I suppose. We'll see, because they'll need all the help they can get against this Roosters side. And look, things didn't go their way last week, and the Roosters were just fantastic. But it's a little bit like I cautioned with South Sydney. South Sydney looked gangbusters in the Charity Shield, but it was actually their opponent just offered no resistance. And as I mentioned, like Angus Crichton's one of the best forwards, well, one of the best back rowers in the game, certainly one of the most important forwards on this team. And losing Jake Friend, I know the news about Suwali getting the exemption, but he's not, factor into this. And Sam Walker is in the reserves. Again, these are good media talking points, but they don't move the punting needle for me. Still no Victor Radley, as I mentioned before. Of course, I know the Roosters are the better team, but I just think they'll meet a lot more resistance this week than what they did last week. And I'm really happy to get plus 12.5 on this game. So we're riding the Tigers again on the Tiger train. And finally, Sharks host the Raiders. Remember that Sharks' home games continue to be at Jubilee while they get Shark Park renovated. The line is 7.5. Sharks catching the points and the total 40.5. So Jesse Ramian got suspended from the game, so that's a loss for the Sharks, while the Raiders named the same 17. And something I noted in my for my live recap notes, but I forgot to say, I really said that Johnny Bateman would be irreplaceable for the Raiders, and he is a one-of-a-kind type of bloke. But Hudson Young at the right edge for them was their best player last week, in my opinion. So you've done pretty well. Just another testament to the depth of the Raiders that a guy like him comes through, gets his opportunity and kills it. In this game, when I look at it from punting perspective, I'm either playing the Sharks plus the points or I'm passing. I was impressed with them last week. I thought they executed really well, even in trying conditions. And I don't want to be biased, but I wasn't that impressed by the Raiders. Maybe it's because I had money against them, so I just felt like the Tigers let them off the hook way too easily. But, even the late try that the Raiders got was like a scoop and score, where the Tigers broke the line, had a chance to score and pull the game close. Ball went to ground, Raiders picked it up, went 70 metres. I didn't think the Tigers made them work too hard last week. I think the Sharks will make them work harder in this one. But if you look across the path, no doubt about it, the Raiders are the stronger team. So I'm tempted to play the Sharks. But then again, when you've won last week by 14 points, as the Sharks did, you don't get a huge amount of value. So I don't have a best bet for you guys tonight. Check in tomorrow, check in on Friday if I find something that jumps out at me enough to play. That'll do it, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think. Ask any questions or share your tips or your thoughts. As I said, the tips will come out in the next day or two, so just monitor the Tripod app and the Tripod group. And I'll be back on Sunday night to recap the round live. Most importantly, always gamble responsibly. Lego!